Sure. Well, I'm with the Center for Public Integrity.
You can look at me as opposed to looking at the camera.
Okay, sure. My name is Drew Clark, and I work at the Center for Public Integrity. The Center is a nonprofit producer of investigative journalism, and we've produced a project that we call Well Connected. And the key part of Well Connected is our media tracker. The media tracker allows you to type in any zip code in the United States or city and state and find out who owns the media in your zip code.
So why would you want to know that? Who cares?
Well, a lot of people want to know that for a lot of different reasons. You could be an activist and you want to take a position on some of the issues about media ownership. You could be a competitor and you want to enter the business in competition to the media. You want to have an independent news organization and you want to know what it's like. Maybe you want to do a low-power FM station and you want to get a sense of what the market is like. You could be a policymaker wanting to understand the parameters of how media ownership affects individuals. Or you could be an academic or researcher who wants to lend some light to this debate and needs good, solid, factual data.
So what kind of trends or patterns have you noticed? Tell me some stories about some people's experiences with the tool.
Well, the media tracker is widely used by people who know about it. We're here trying to let more people know about it so that they can use it. Some of the stories I've heard is that people really discovered a lot about the way ownership is happening across the country. Some people believe that by typing in their zip code and seeing what companies there are, they can actually discern trends in ownership even on a regional level. For instance, you go to a city in Iowa, you can see that multiple stations are owned by a small Iowa company that may have been owned by individual owners previously. So while we have the broad trend of media ownership and large corporations owning lots of stations, you even see on the local level that happening. But I guess I also want to point out, though, that there's cross-cutting trends going on. For instance, many media companies are not engaging in the kinds of combinations that they once were interested in. Tribune Company has been at the forefront of wanting to get liberalization on the cross-ownership rules so that they could own more radio stations, own more TV stations and newspapers. They've actually started to take a different strategy where they aren't as interested in that. So there's really all kinds of things going on in the media landscape right now, but whatever you're trying to do with it, you need to have the factual analysis behind it.
So let's move from talking about the tool specifically to what it has to tell us, and specifically to people who say aren't media geeks or wonks or don't have necessarily a vested interest in the industry and might have the attitude like, well, I mean, I'm interested in reading a newspaper, but why should I care who owns it and whether they own a radio station as well? Who cares? Why should I care about that?
Well, I mean, everyone who produces journalism comes at it with a particular approach. At this moment in time, there's so many different ways of doing journalism that you really need to know the most possible about who's producing the news. It could be someone who has ownership interests in a variety of other industries. And like, for instance, Walt Disney. I mean, they own ABC. They also own Disney theme parks. I certainly wouldn't expect to get objective information about Walt Disney's theme parks from an ABC News channel because of the direct ownership interest. And there's many cases like that. Slate Magazine used to be owned by Microsoft. Now it's owned by the Washington Post. You wouldn't go to Slate Magazine to find some information about the actions of Microsoft in an antitrust matter. There's all kinds of ways in which there are conflicts of interest. And it's important to know who's producing the news so that you can be able to assess the validity of the news.
In terms of trends, do you think that those kinds of conflicts of interest are they increasing? Are they decreasing? What kind of trends do you see happening?
I guess it's hard to generalize about whether those are increasing or decreasing. I mean, you see a lot of ways in which media are trying to get involved in multiple areas. So although I talked a little bit earlier about the Tribune Company and how they're changing some of their strategies at trying to do joint newspaper television operations, others are beginning to go in that direction. Like the Washington Post, for instance, has actually struck a deal with Bonneville Communications in Washington, D.C. to have Washington Post Radio. The station isn't owned by the Washington Post. That would be illegal under the cross-ownership rules. Instead, it's owned by Bonneville, but all the content is provided by Washington Post Radio. So you see that some news organizations are trying to cross a lot of fields. Other organizations are sticking to their knitting and focusing on their basics.
trying to sort of think of ways that you can kind of further sort of personalize this issue for people.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, when you were, I've asked this question of a few different interview subjects now, but like when you were a little kid, you know, did you lie awake at night thinking, man, someday when I grow up, I want to build a media tracker?
I think that what I'm attracted to by this subject is the way technology and telecommunications and media are converging. And the new technologies of today make communications opportunities available that simply didn't exist prior to the advancement of Moore's Law. Moore's Law being, of course, the law that computer circuitry is doubling every 18 months. And so, you know, you guys can have a really stellar quality video camera here for a cost that's a lot lower than it would have been before the advent of digitization. And so that opens great new possibilities for video, for recording artists to put forth their news, their documentaries, their video tapes of political rallies. I mean, for goodness sakes, it's arguable that YouTube caused the election of Jim Webb, a Democrat of Virginia, because of that video that was shot at a campaign rally by someone with low-cost equipment and put on YouTube. So I think that what is appealing to me, what makes me want to get up in the morning, is to examine how it is that technology is affecting our landscape for freedom of expression, our landscape for communication.
So if you take that personal interest and combine it with some of the trends you see happening in ownership and what have you, and technology and the convergence of these things together, if you were to sort of pull our crystal ball out and look, say, 10 years into the future, what do you see there?
I see a totally different media landscape than right now. I think newspapers are on the decline. They will be very weakened, if not completely gone, as a viable media force. What takes their place is really uncertain right now, and that's why today is an extremely exciting period, because you have independent media, you have websites, you have all kinds of mashups. One of the things that I find fascinating is the way the kinds of controls that are exercised over media are in many cases often copyright controls. They're controls by companies like Walt Disney that are doing everything they can to prevent people from using the cultural materials that they have freely appropriated, like the stories of the Brothers Grimm that they make into Walt Disney's stories of Snow White and others. I mean, these are the kinds of things that people, and they have benefited from the ability to take our cultural heritage and reuse it and remix it. Today's copyright laws make it extremely difficult for people to digitally remix and to digitally take portions of one copyrighted work and reuse it in another one. And those are the kinds of controls that could stifle the development of a really vibrant media landscape. But to your broader point about what the media is going to be like, it's really up in the air, and I think that's why it's a vibrant time for a lot of people who come to this conference, because there are so many new ways that they can get their message out.
My last question, you talk about these developments and trends, and the point you just made is kind of that, sometimes when we think about these issues, we think about them as purely technology issues. So technology is going to make things like this, or it's going to make it like that, and sometimes we kind of just forget about the whole political dimension. It's not just going to happen.
Absolutely.
It depends on where people push it. So what do you think, talk about the sort of political dimension, what's at stake, and what we should be focusing on in the year ahead.
Oh yeah, thanks for bringing me back to that point, Matt. The other key thing that gets me to get up in the morning and do what I do is that so many of the decisions that are made about our media and telecommunications landscape are made by the 5 individuals who sit at the Portals, which is a big real estate building in Southwest Washington, the Federal Communications Commission. The FCC is a hive of lobbying activity. It's a hive of untransparency. And we need to have people like the Center for Public Integrity and others going, getting documents, doing reporting, putting it out there so that the people can see what happens inside the closed doors. People can see what decisions are made and how those decisions are made, how lobbying is taking the place of a free marketplace of ideas where people are competing based on the quality of their materials. Because what you see, for instance, is you see companies trying to get indecency regulations put upon their competitors. You see that constantly right now with the broadcasters seeking to get indecency rules applied to the cable industry. And where are they going? They're going to the Federal Communications Commission. Who do they have on their side? FCC Chairman Kevin Martin. I think it's extremely important that we follow what's going on at the FCC, because the political aspect of our media system is one that's too impossible to ignore.